WiiM sent me their amp for my honest review. Unlike many other YouTube reviewers, I take the word honest seriously, not sugarcoating problems, which has gotten a few manufacturers a little frustrated with me, to say the least. Manufacturers say they want honest, but what they really want is, sure, product X isn't as good as a $10,000 setup, but you're only paying for 1/10 the price. What a bargain. Using this method, you mask the flaws. I don't do that. I compare everything with my reference products and give a product a rating on the infinite rating system. Then you can make the decision if a $500 aged Wisconsin cheddar Wagyu cheeseburger cooked rare is worth the extra $50 that you would get for an American cheese Wagyu cheeseburger cooked rare. For those of you on the fence, get the aged Wisconsin cheddar. Now over at DarkoAudio, John said the following about this WiiM amp in his recent review about it.
If it were me looking for an amp for the LS50 Meta, I'd go for the WiiM amp and put the $400 saving on the Sonos towards the cost of a subwoofer, because the WiiM amp will high pass the KEF to shift the bass burden from its mid-bass driver to the subwoofer. So that means that the WiiM amp won't have to work as hard.
Listening to Darko is how you end up with a system that you will be upgrading for years, because Darko either doesn't critically listen, isn't very good at listening, or doesn't listen at all when making a product review. Remember, Darko is the guy who recommended buying a $79 IEMA A01 amplifier to pair with an $1,800 pair of Wharfedale Linton Heritage speakers to, quote, help out the high end. If you remember, I didn't recommend buying the Sonos amp, but that had nothing to do with the quality of the Sonos amp. It had to do with Sonos's lack of a remote control, putting all its capabilities into an app so that their CEO, when he wants a bump in salary, they can brick old units and force customers to buy a new one, which they've done once before. Purely for amp performance, the Sonos is well worth the extra money over the WiiM amp. WiiM, to their credit, gives you this nice remote control. If something happens to WiiM in the future, you can always change the input and use the WiiM amp as, well, an amplifier. Good job, WiiM, and bad job, Sonos. Because WiiM also sent me the WiiM Pro Plus, I'm going to completely focus this review on the amplifier. Hell, this review is long enough without going into the very good control app and other features of the WiiM amp. On the back, you have a network jack, if you don't want to use Wi-Fi, HDMI ARC in, say for a TV, a USB input, RCA inputs, optical inputs, and a sub output. Binding posts for your speakers are pretty decent, not the super cheap ones you would expect, a $299 all-in-one component. On the front, you have a volume knob, and next to it, lights that tell you the current volume setting. To the left, you have a status light indicator for input sources. For streaming, it'll be white. For optical, it's orange. For the line-in input, it's light green. And for Bluetooth, it's a pure green light. You were thinking it would be blue, weren't you? Well, that shows you how terrible you are at interface design. Let's first talk about power. At first, what I'm about to say may sound negative, but when it comes to the tests I run, they are far more demanding because they are coming from a test signal to an amplifier from the line input from a CD player, specifically a Yamaha CDS2100 SACD player, which outputs 2 volts. This voltage is less than most Class D amps want, less than some amps want, but it's the real world. You plug a CD player in and you listen. And it's precisely because of these real world conditions that many people have complained their low-priced Class D amps aren't getting as loud as they would like. So let's take a look at what the WiiM amp could produce. Using a 0 dB 1 kHz signal, we get 18 volts and 4.5 amps, about 80 watts. So you can see if we increase the output voltage from 2 volts to say around 4.5, we would probably have no problem meeting the WiiM spec of 120 watts into 4 ohms. Remember what I just said, the WiiM amp can meet its specs wattage given a 4.5 volt 1 kHz signal, because WiiM fanboys aren't going to like what's coming next. Now, music isn't a 1 kHz signal. I may be going out on a limb here, but dare I say, it may be a bit more complex. So the test I like to use is uncorrelated stereo noise from 20 to 20,000 on my test CD. The test CD, though, does not specify if the track is at 0 dB or at negative 10 dB or at negative 100 dB. Therefore, I need to first give you a reference on how difficult this track is to reproduce. My reference amplifier is the Yamaha AS2100, rated at 160 watts into 4 ohms. And this track drops wattage output on the AS2100 to 8.8 watts with this signal. That's a tough load, taking one of the best built amplifiers in the world down 95% in wattage output. So what happens to the WiiM amp rated at 120 watts into a 4 ohm load? It didn't break a single watt. In fact, it didn't get close to 1 watt. The WiiM amp got to about 0.1 watt. This is why I could run this test with my speakers hooked up, because at 4 ohms at 1 meter away with a speaker rated at 90 dB sensitivity, the decibel level is only going to get to about 80 dB. My Tannoy DC8 Ti speakers are 6 ohm loads, and it doesn't get past 77 decibels. Now the next track is from 125 to 7 kilohertz uncorrelated stereo noise, and the WiiM amp jumps to about 0.33 watts. This would get you to about 85 dB. The reason I started these tests was when I tested the Fosse V3, an amplifier loved by all except me. My controversial Fosse V3 amplifier review I found had anemic power output during my listening tests. It is my opinion, which means it's a fact, that the 1 kilohertz amplifier tests have to be stopped. These Class D chips are seemingly designed to pass them. But with music and anything more complicated, they aren't able to achieve anything near their specified ratings. No one listens to a 1 kilohertz tone, and I admit, no one listens to uncorrelated stereo noise from 20 to 20,000 hertz. But this test shows you the difficulty low-cost Class D amplifiers have with anything beyond a 1 kilohertz test tone. Yes, I'm talking to you, Admir, at AudioScienceReview. A lot of people are buying these cheap Class D amps because it's been tested as producing 80, 100, or 120 watts. They can't do it, not without a simple 1 kilohertz tone. Now luckily, I'm not the only person noticing this issue with Class D amps, though I believe I am the first to have specified it. The WiiM amp was recently tested by Erin at ErinsAudioCorner. When he sent a 1 kilohertz signal, the WiiM amp met its specified wattage output. But when using a multi-tone signal, Erin reported it dropped 33 watts. A link to his website in the description. Now remember, multi-tone is not uncorrelated stereo. It's still simple. It's just different tones in between. It's not all tones at the same time. Bam! Now I'm going to show you another snippet from a different audio reviewer, and for my longtime followers, this is going to surprise you. It's from the great Andrew Robinson, who said the following about the WiiM amplifier.
I know there are measurements out there that show the WiiM to be neutral with terrific signal-to-noise ratio, but the problem with measurements is they tend to show you a best worst-case scenario. When fed a constant test signal, I'm not surprised that the WiiM performs, maybe even over-delivers given its price. But test signals in music are not the same. Music isn't constant.
Yes, he just said when sent a constant test signal. He's talking about the 1 kilohertz signal for measuring an amp, and I really wish I was wearing a hat, because my hat is off to you, Mr. Robinson. I am sick of this 1 kilohertz test signal, which digital amps are designed to handle with aplomb. I'm a big fan of what Amir is doing over at Audio Science Review, but his followers are buying these digital amps thinking they can meet their specs when listening to music, and the fact of the matter is, they can't. So while I've had my disagreements with Andrew in the past, with his recent review of the Yamaha amps not having that Yamaha sound, and this review of his of the WiiM amp, he's starting to lose my attention, and that's a good thing. Now it's time to put a caveat on everything I just said. Most people will have no issue with the power output because if you listen via the streaming portion, it will send the voltage the amplifier wants. And while music can be more complicated than Erin's multi-tone test, let's say you lose 40 watts instead of 33 watts off the top, knocking this down to say an 80 watt amplifier into 4 ohms, well, sitting 2 meters away, you could hit 99 decibels from a 4 ohm speaker with a sensitivity rating of 89 dB, and that's still with 3 dB left over for dynamic headroom. That's plenty loud, and into an 8 ohm load, you're probably looking at somewhere around 95 dB. But sadly, this amplifier has yet another issue. Like so many sub $500 Class D amps, it's load dependent. You could try to EQ this out, but you shouldn't have to. Everything getting to your speakers should be as flat as possible. Then hopefully you only have to EQ your speakers. Trying to EQ multiple products that interact based on load, volume, etc. is not only tedious, but it may be impossible. Let's not forget you're also EQing because of your room issues. So why add an amplifier that needs to be added to the mix of EQ? Unless you want to add this amp to the Wharfdale Lintons, then maybe those speakers sing. So I listened and listened and listened for 600 hours. And very much like when I reviewed the Fosse V3, the WiiM amp lacks dynamics. But honestly, it was even worse than the Fosse. When playing Bish at levels to fill a cathedral, there just wasn't enough power when half her pipes were playing, and then she went to open up the 16-foot pipe full bore. At that moment, I should have been feeling the presence of God himself. Instead, I was left thinking this was more of a Percy Jackson moment. In songs that are already loud and then are supposed to be even more dynamic with drums being added, that impact is simply less than when compared to my AS2100 reference amp. Now, many hours into my listening session, I can't tell you exactly how far because I was blackout drunk for so long, but a couple hours after I came to, I heard something odd. I was getting to Bish's old 1960s psychedelic organ tracks where she was messing around a lot with stereo mixing, moving the pipes from left channel to right channel, back and forth, trying to give you the effect the organ was swirling around your head. But something was wrong. The effect wasn't as strong as it should be. And while I was already 2 bottles of wine into this listening session, after awakening, the swirling effect should have dropped me to the floor, but it did not, to my astonishment when I was still able to stand up without falling down. So what was the issue? I could hear the other channel slightly when nothing should have been there. Let me articulate that better for you. Where there should be nothing, there was something. Yes, my friends, the problem was channel separation. So it's time to do another test, one I will be adding to all my amplifier tests going forward. Let's take a listen to my reference amplifier playing the left, center, and right channels from a test CD. The right speaker is not connected.
Left channel, center channel.
Did you hear that? You shouldn't have, because there's nothing there. It is silent when the right channel is playing. Now, before Lachlan over at Passion for Audio comments, did you try an $800 power cord on your $300 WiiM Amp streamer? Sadly, he's got me. I did not. All my testing is done with the lousy power cord sent to me from the manufacturers. Now let's take a listen to the WiiM Amp.
Left channel, center channel. Right channel.
Damn, that's not good. There's really nothing else to say about channel separation. This, unfortunately, is not a state-of-the-art amplifier. For someone strictly limited to $300, because of the issues with this amplifier, I'd recommend the WiiM Pro for $149 and the IEMA Max 07 amplifier for about $75. That's a $75 savings over the WiiM Amp, and you get a better amplifier. Not a great amplifier, but one without crosstalk and channel separation issues. So how do you rate a streaming amplifier that has all the issues we just mentioned, but has a great control app? A really nice form factor. Very stable, and can be used where you don't need it for critical listening. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. A big glass of milk alongside a chocolate wafer icebox cake. It's something you don't need, but it's nice to have. Now this shocking conclusion may blow you away, but I actually still like the WiiM amp. Wait, did he just say he likes something that isn't any good? There are times when convenience trumps quality. For example, you're on your way home from work and you need to get a gallon of milk. You could go to the grocery store or go to the convenience store and save 10 minutes. Depending on what kind of rush you're in, you may choose the convenience store even if the product quality of the milk isn't as good. And for me, the WiiM amp is going to replace one of my Yamaha WXC50s. I use that Yamaha in conjunction with an old Onkyo amplifier for outside sound near the pool. Because I can't control the Onkyo via Wi-Fi from outside, I keep it on all the time. I don't feel like paying $600 for another Yamaha WXA50 for sound around the pool. And this free-to-me WiiM amp solves my frustration of wasting power with a 20-year-old always-on amplifier. I now have a way to save a little electricity and enjoy music when I'm outside when I'm not critically listening. So while I don't recommend the WiiM amp for your hi-fi system, there may be a location in your house where it will work for you. Thank you for watching this edition of the Scientific Audiophile. Please subscribe, like, and comment so you'll be notified of future videos. Well, that should appease the WiiM people. I actually recommended some use for the WiiM amp without actually freaking making a fool out of myself like Darko.